Hey, it's Mark Ferguson with Invest for More, and today I'm talking about fire sprinkler systems and why the movies and television shows get it so wrong with what really happens in real life. Now, we're walking up to a building that's actually been torn down now, but it had a fire in it, and this was a building I actually had under contract, and we're going to talk about how those fire sprinkler systems worked in this building. We'll also talk about fire sprinkler systems in another building I'm familiar with, what the county and state requires for fire sprinkler systems and how that is really increasing prices as well on real estate. So this is an old Hewlett-Packard building, had 250,000 square feet, and I had it under contract for a while too. And I'm sorry for the shaky video, it was a little old before I had a better stabilizer. And in this building, you can see that section right there. That section was attached to this building. It was kind of the cafeteria for Hewlett-Packard. Well, when I first viewed this building, that cafeteria was still intact. It was still abandoned. And they actually built a school, or were in the process of building a school during this video right now. But someone had set a fire in that cafeteria. And this fire sprinklers went off, and it went out. But the big thing here is the entire fire sprinkler system does not go off for the whole building. That is a huge myth. So I was just watching Parks and Rec the other day, and someone pulled the fire alarm and all the sprinklers went off in the whole building. Not what happens. If you see someone, a fire in one area, or someone, stick a lighter up to a sprinkler, all the sprinklers go off in the whole building. Well, how most sprinklers work is they have some kind of heat sensor on them or something that will melt, and if that melts when it gets too hot, one sprinkler will go off in that area. So I learned this from this building because I was walking through with the agent and some other people on this building, and I saw the fire. I'm like, oh, the fire sprinklers, they must have soaked the whole building and flooded everything. I'm like, oh no, if all the sprinklers in this building went off at the same time, the whole city would lose water pressure. Like it would be so much water that the system could not handle it, and only one sprinkler goes off at a time. And I didn't think about that. I'm like, you're right. It would be so much water going through this whole building. You see the sprinklers up there on the roof. It would be insane. So when you see that on movies, on television shows, that is not what happens. That is not real life. Now, there are a couple of very rare instances where you might have a system that all the sprinklers go off on. And that would be maybe in a power plant or some kind of other facility that is extremely flammable, where if one fire starts, the whole place could go up right away. That is the only time, and they're not in residential, they're not really in commercial buildings, it's just in high-risk buildings where that can happen. Now, something else to consider, too, is you see people, the sprinklers go off, they get wet, yay, it's a fun time. It is not a fun time. So my sister used to manage a 10-story apartment building. It had fire sprinklers. I was the on-site manager there for a while as well. And I think it was after I was there, or after I had left, someone had started hanging clothes on one of the fire sprinklers. So the sprinkler kind of went horizontal from the wall. It didn't come vertical from the ceiling. And they thought, oh, that's a nice hook to hang my clothes on. Well, they knocked the heat sensor off. The sprinkler went off. And it doused their entire apartment with water. And it is not nice water. When you see sparkling, clear, fun water on TV, think oily, dirty, disgusting water that's been sitting in pipes for years, right? They're usually closed systems. They got oil in them to keep things from rusting, corroding, and this water is not good water. So if those fire sprinklers go off, it's probably destroying your clothes, the floor, the furniture, anything in there. And that's another reason why they don't, have entire systems go off at once, because it will destroy all the contents in a building with that disgusting, oily water. And that's what it did in that apartment. It destroyed everything in the apartment, all the tenants' clothes, belongings, everything pretty much had to be thrown out because of the water that was in there. And then I believe the unit below had to do some of that as well, because the water, crept through the floors and got their unit wet and disgusting and dirty too. So it's not as fun and happy as it looks like on TV. Something else that we're seeing happen is towns are starting to require fire sprinkler systems more and more. There are multiple towns in Colorado that now require fire sprinkler systems on every single family house. Used to be, maybe some areas had houses that were 3 stories or had a certain square footage. Now some of these towns are requiring it everywhere. In fact, where the Marshall Fire was, so many homes were destroyed a couple of years ago, they require fire sprinkler systems, which was a huge roadblock to people rebuilding their homes. And we'll talk about that here in a second, how they're trying to fix that. But it is not cheap to put these systems in. So, and I've been doing some research, and some places say it's only $1 or $2 a square foot to put in a fire sprinkler system. In reality, no, it's not. So we'll take a look at that too, and show you how expensive these fire sprinkler systems are, and how that is contributing to our expensive housing right now too. And this is the upstairs of that building. It was crazy. Now, I did ask my plumber how much he thought it would cost. He said he hasn't done any systems like that, but he said to charge $1 or $2 a square foot is just insane. There's no way it would cost that much. And I did find some Reddit posts, not my favorite site, but sometimes there's useful information on there, and people are paying $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 for fire sprinkler systems in their homes. And that is not something that just, isn't accounted for when you purchase a new home. That is a massive expense that goes onto the cost of a home, and that's just one little thing. So I did a video about building codes and how they add cost to homes and development costs, all of that. Well, if you have a fire sprinkler system requirement, if you have a Tesla charging system requirement, if you have massive insulation requirements, you have new window requirements, all of it adds up, and that's why you're seeing some areas with homes that have doubled in value in a few years, and ironically, they doubled when the building codes became way stricter and it became twice as expensive to build homes. So it's not just investors buying all the houses, which is another falsity I talk about a lot, or too much demand. It's because it's so expensive to build and there's so many requirements now. And sure, safety is a concern. Fire sprinkler systems 100% make houses safer. But if you want to make houses extremely safe and add all these things, they're going to get more expensive. You're going to have trade-offs. You can't have all the safety items and require all this stuff and expect houses to just be cheap like they were before. And new construction is what drives the cost of existing houses in areas too. Unless that area is very depressed and there's tons of houses for sale, new construction is what brings up the prices of everything else. So the stricter those building codes are, the more requirements they have, the more expensive every property is going to get. And a lot of times those building codes are for existing houses as well too, not just new homes. So hey, you could get to a point where governments and cities are saying, okay, now we're going to require fire sprinkler systems on existing homes. And those are even more expensive than new construction, where you might be spending $60,000, $100,000 because you're tearing out insulation and walls and heating and all of that stuff to put those in. So the Marshall Fire happened a little over 2 years ago. And right here it says it would cost $30,000 for each rebuilt home to add fire sprinkler systems. And one of the biggest problems with this fire, hundreds of homes were destroyed. It was in a suburban area. It wasn't up in the mountains. It was a crazy, crazy situation. Well, a lot of people's insurance was not high enough to cover the cost of rebuilding their homes because of things like fire sprinkler systems, new building codes, all the changes the city made to make homes safer. And this is something that's a huge problem in a lot of areas. And what that article said is, there's a bird flying through the building. What that article said was they waived that requirement for people in the Marshall Fire. Not for the whole town, not for the whole area. Just people who had lost their home in the Marshall Fire no longer had to install fire sprinkler systems just to save with costs. And up to this point, I believe a quarter of the houses lost in that fire have been rebuilt. And that's over 2 years, 2 years and 4 months or something since that fire happened. So it is not an easy process to rebuild, not a fun process. And when building codes are so strict and it takes forever to get them approved because there's so many codes and things to go through, that makes it even harder and harder to get things done and get those codes done as well. So you might ask, well, hi Mom, what has all of that done to the cost of housing in that area? And well, we'll look at that too. Here is Superior, Colorado, a Superior, Louisville area where the Marshall Fire was. The median price of houses listed right now, $925,000 in that area. And this is not a super dense populated area. It's not a downtown Denver where there's simply no space to build stuff. It's pretty, not rural, but very suburban. And here you can see a basic 1,400 square foot house is $750,000 on a 2,300 square foot lot. And that's not because everybody is moving to Superior and wants to live there. It is mostly because of building codes, development restrictions, how difficult it is to build there. And it's not just Superior. We look at Louisville, which is right across the Highway 36 there. $925,000 because they have similar codes and restrictions and things going on in that area. You can get a mobile home there for $190,000, but there you go. There's a $970,000 house, which in my area that would probably be $450,000 to $500,000, and I'm about 40 miles from there, maybe 50. So if you look at other areas that are very similar in location, just as close to the mountains, here's Longmont, Colorado, $599, still expensive. And Colorado in general has gotten way more expensive, but that's a massive difference between the two areas because you've got statewide restrictions on development, building codes, different things going on. But it's just insane how expensive some of these areas are. I'm in Greeley, not too far away, and if we look at our area, our median price is $441,000. Now, a lot of people think it's just supply and demand, where people want to move. That's what drives prices. It's almost all cost to build, because if they could build cheaper and faster, they would, right? If they could build houses for $200,000 in Greeley, and that was their all-in cost, they would be building thousands and thousands of them because they like to make money. Builders want to make money. People who are in business want to make money, but it's so expensive to build. The prices have been shooting up. So, fire sprinkler systems, I'm not saying there's not a place for them. I'm not saying we shouldn't have them. I'm not saying they don't save lives and save property. They most certainly do. In fact, in commercial properties, it's giant buildings like this, probably a great idea to have a fire sprinkler system. In individual houses, just realize if you want more safety, you want better building codes, you want more restrictions, it's going to drive the price up. You can't. There's no way to keep restricting builders, keep restricting developers, and expect them just to charge less. That's not. They're not in it to lose money. You're not in it to lose money at your job. People don't work for free. That's just the way the world works. And I saw this on one of my own properties too. You might remember the property I bought that was a church and had a couple of apartments with it and a house with it. I was trying to develop the church part into more housing, trying to supply housing. Everybody wants more housing. The city was requiring me to put in a fire sprinkler system in that building if I did that. Retrofitting a fire sprinkler system, $60,000, $80,000 to add 2 units. You know, it doesn't count all the other things they want me to do, like pave the alley and make the whole exterior fire safe. It was crazy, all the stuff they want me to bring 2 shares of water, which would have been another $150,000. So it obviously made 0 sense for me to do it. I sold that property. I did fine on it. But a lot of people are trying to create more housing. A lot of people want to turn vacant properties into residential. A lot of people want to buy new residential. It's just really, really hard right now because of all the government restrictions and codes and different things. Running into it all over the place in Colorado. I know other people are running into it all over the place in other states. And it's no coincidence where you see the lowest prices in the country tend to have the least restrictions on building, on development. So you can say they have less demand, but again, if it was easy and cheap to build, that's what builders would do. They would be building like crazy if there was massive profit potential. All right, that's my spiel on the old Hewlett-Packard building and fire sprinklers. Do not hang clothes on them. Be careful around fire sprinklers. Do not think it's fun to set them off. Remember, smoke probably won't set them off. It's usually heat. And pulling the fire alarm should not set them off. That will just sound the alarm. And the whole building probably won't get flooded if one of them goes off. It's meant just to suppress, the fire in that one area. So, I mean, that's something else to consider too. If you have fire sprinklers in homes and you've got this system and you, cook things a little too hot or something else happens, could prevent a fire, or it could flood your house too in that one area. Probably not the whole house, but it could cause a lot of damage. And again, I'm not saying they're not something to have. I'm not saying they don't work well and save lives and people, but there's a cost to things. And if you want to make everything as safe and as absolute bulletproof as you possibly can, everything's going to get way more expensive. All right, thanks for watching. We'll, of course, have more videos on my properties, rentals, flips, residential, commercial, all of that, and the businesses, laundromats, liquor store, things like that as well. I said I would leave, but I do have a few buildings with systems in it myself. My big strip mall with the grocery store, my office, it has a big fire sprinkler system in it. We've got to get it checked out every single year by a company that comes in. Fire department comes in once in a while. They check it out, make sure it's okay. And that all costs money too. So it's not just the upfront expense, it's the maintenance. If anything goes wrong, things like that, you've got to have all that done on a yearly basis as well. A lot of my other buildings are grandfathered in. They don't have fire sprinkler systems, but if they were built new, it would be a requirement. So, even if your area doesn't require fire sprinkler systems for single family homes, they might require it for duplexes or fourplexes or homes of a certain square footage. It all depends on your codes and how all that works. Okay, now I promise I'm leaving. Take care. We'll be back soon.